How to use the Creator. This is focused on racing, creating tracks, but you'll be able to create death matches or captures, last team standing. You can't build death matches on blocks in the air. You will respawn underneath the block. As far as I know, I made one and I was respawning underneath it. So don't waste your time trying to make a Call of Duty map on blocks. It's not going to work. You have to do it in the world map on the ground. But it's pretty fun. It's pretty easy. Alright, so GTA 5, how to use the Creator. Step 1, you want to load into the Creator. Pause menu, Creator. It will take you to a menu where you can choose from your published and your saved maps, missions, custom, whatever. You can create a death match, a race, a capture. Last team standing. You can create a stunt race or a normal race. Stunt races got the boosts and the jumps and the ramps. Interesting thing about published is once you publish it, you can create a copy of it. And then it'll be in saved. And then you can tool around with it again. The one thing you want to make note of here, so you don't delete your shit accidentally, is you can only have one saved file, even if you rename it. So if you create race ABC1, if you get in there, tool around with it and create ABC race 2 and just change the title name of it, it'll still be the same save file. It'll overwrite your first one. Alright, so the first thing you need to do is place a trigger. That's that white dot. You load right to where that trigger is. Additionally, the trigger is where the people stand around at when the race starts, when the match starts. You could string all these together and make a playlist of all your races, various missions. It's another thing you could do outside the Creator. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in of how to do all this. Because I've made a whole bunch of these tracks. You put down a trigger. The trigger can only be so far away from the starting point of your race. You have to put down a race grid to start the race. And that can only be so far away from your trigger. So if you're building into the sky on blocks, you're going to have to put it on top of a building like this, or on top of a mountain. Trigger needs to be close to starting grid, put it on a building or a hill or something like that. So I put that on top of the building, and that was the race I built right there. The track I built. This one is right there. And if the back of your track isn't long enough, the cars will fall off the back. So you've got to check that. Take another note there. Check the back of your grid. It's for 30 players, this race. Because they will just fall off the back end and start on the ground. The starting grid is where your race ends. It's where the flag is. So wherever you put your starting grid, unless it's a point-to-point race, is where you have the checkpoint that you go through to start the second lap. So where your trigger's at is where you put your starting grid. Where your starting grid is where the end of your race is, which is where you start your second lap. That can totally screw up your day if you spend all day building a track and don't realize that. So now that that's out of the way, once you load into a race, you can test it and race it immediately. You just jump in to either saved or published, and there's an option there for test. If you use a primary and secondary checkpoint, it will only show your primary or secondary checkpoints while you're racing. If you create a race and then after 20 checkpoints you want to split the track, so checkpoint 21 goes off to the left, checkpoint 21 secondary goes off to the right. When it comes to testing your track, if you use secondary checkpoints, you're going to have to test your track twice before you can publish it. I've used secondary checkpoints at the start of races just to keep things fanned out so players, it's not carnage, aren't crashing into everybody. Alright, so you can't add checkpoints once you've already added checkpoints. You can't put a new checkpoint in. You can only delete them or add to the back end of them. You can put a secondary, but you can't add between them. You can delete them, so you can delete checkpoint 16. Then checkpoint 17 to 20 will become 16 to 19. So you put down 20 checkpoints. And now you want to add a checkpoint between 15 and 16. So you want to have 21 checkpoints with a new checkpoint 15. Or you can add 22, 23, 24, but you can't add between them. You can't add once you've already put them down. Now we'll actually get on to how to move these things around. I'm building on the PlayStation 4. On the PlayStation 4, I assign the L3 and the R3 to my left D-pad and my up D-pad. You're going to have to constantly turn on and off your custom button assignments, depending on how patient you are. If you can just scroll through menus to the right all the time, you'll be fine. The reason that I do this is because to raise and lower the track, you press L3 to raise or lower and R3 to raise or lower. So I mapped them to the D-pad, so I just press up and down over there, because I don't like pressing L3 and R3. And to do that, you press the middle PlayStation button and hold it down, and then a menu pops up, and then you go down to accessibility and you turn on custom button assignments. I made a video about how to do it. To actually do the button assignments, to actually lay them out, you got to go out to the XMB menu, the main menu, to settings, to accessibility, to button assignments, and then just assign L3 to left and R3 to up. Alright, so you got your button assignments all set. It's pretty easy to move stuff around and manipulate it and get it the way you want. You can make the pieces snap together. And you can lay them in any way you want. Twist them, turn them, pitch them, yaw them. You can't go back and select the track piece and just slightly move it. Once you touch a track piece that's already been set down, you have to replace it all over again. So with that out of the way, I could tell you how to adjust all these things. I'm going to recommend, based on my experience, that you get the large block under track blocks. It's like 24 by 48. And you make it one color, green or gray. And you put that down. And then you get another block. You turn prop snapping on. And you get another block. And you go about 4 blocks wide by 4 or 5 blocks long. And you vary between green and gray. And you don't have to do that as you're building it. You can just go block, 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 and then go up to the front, block, 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 up to the front, and then go back when you're done and just press L1 or R1 to cycle through colors. Then you'll have a big, flat 4x4 set of blocks to put your track on. So just lay out enough flat blocks to do what you think you're going to do with. You can use a maximum of 200 pieces. Some people on PC have made like 600 piece races. I was watching a video. Said he used 650 pieces, but on the PlayStation 4 you can use 200 items, and you can cycle between them. You can cycle between checkpoints, you can cycle between props that you set down. Alright, so the two options in the props menu that are most important are allow props stacking, and the one underneath that, prop snapping. And you can turn those on and off. What prop stacking does is, if you've got a 4x4 grid of blocks, anything you bring into the world will be on top of that block. It'll all rest on it, meaning you don't have to adjust it up and down to try to get it onto the block. It'll just be there on top of it. This becomes useful if you're moving things up and down, if you're burying things that you want to drive around like a barrel as as a prop to race around, but you want to bury it halfway down. You want half a barrel. If you turn prop stacking on, it'll appear on top of the block. Then you'd have to go to advanced options and lower it down. I'm going to tell you how to do that in a second. But what can happen is, if you don't have prop stacking on, it'll be on the world map below your blocks. Then you'd have to manually adjust it with the left D-pad or the up D-pad and bring it all the way up. But it'll only go so far, and it'll start glitching in between the blocks. So you'll figure this out. Prop stacking, on and off, and adjusting things with your D-pad, L3 to R3, up and down. And if you get it just where you want it halfway, and then suddenly the barrel is on top of the block, full barrel, turn prop stacking off, or just use prop stacking and go to advanced options and lower it down. Because what actually happens is, if you try to just manually adjust it down with your D-pad with the L3 and go down, it'll just snap below and go down onto the world, right? So if you bring a prop in, it'll appear on the GTA world until you get it over near your block, and then it'll be up on the blocks, whether or not you got prop stacking on sometimes. Okay. Prop snapping just is, you're allowing one prop to stick to another prop. And when you do that, you can press L1 and R1 to tilt it up or down, all the way around, stuck to whatever it's stuck to. So that's prop snapping, on and off. Prop stacking, on and off. Then above that is rotation type. It's set to world, which L1 and R1 will just spin it left and right. Now, there's 4 settings for rotation type. There's pitch, yaw, and roll. Moving on to advanced options. Once you go to advanced options, you're limited in what you can do afterwards. So in advanced options, there's the first two settings, or the first 2 options. The first one is going to allow you to raise and lower it. So what you do is you go to advanced options and you press X, and that'll put a check mark at the top. And once you do that, you go to the third option. It's like X, Y, and Z. You go to Z. And Z will let you raise and lower a prop. This is how you bury things in the world. If you've seen like raised stunt tracks and they're halfway under the water or halfway under the map, or you want to put a barrel underneath the map, you can't just adjust it down with the left and with the L3 and R3 with the left D-pad or the up D-pad. The only way to bury it in the world is with advanced options, the first option, and then the third option of the first option, the Z, up and down. And that's how you bury it. And once you get it to the height you want it, you press X and that sets it. So that's the third option in the first option. The second option is moving it left and right, it's a little bit diagonal left and right, which is frustrating. And then the next option is forward and backwards, but it's a little bit diagonal. So if you're trying to line something up perfectly straight, move it just forward and backwards, you've got to adjust it a little bit on one and then go to the other and adjust it a little bit and and like waddle it into place. And then you press X when you're done. You can back out of that and go to the second advanced options. And the second advanced options let you do pitching and rolling and yawing, just like the rotation type setting did in the first props menu. So you can lower something and then pitch it in advanced options. So that's basically all there is to it. You get a block, you go down to rotation type, or you don't even have to go down to it, you just press L1 and R1 to spin it. And then you can raise it and lower it if you're just building on the ground. But if you want to do advanced stuff and bury things either in the block or in the ground or in something else, or you want to have one thing merge with another thing and have two things together, then you're going to be using advanced options. So that's the tutorial. It'll come easy enough to you once you get in there and goof around with it. But you just got to know those basic things. Once you're in advanced options and you're moving it around, you can only use those two advanced options, and prop snapping and stacking no longer will work. Right, so that's the tutorial, the how-to. There's a thing called the Rockstar Social Club, and you can sign up for that, the Rockstar Social Club, and add other people's tracks to your account so that they're bookmarked for you. And when a race is over, on the last screen on the bottom, you can see an option, L1 to bookmark. Then if you want to race that track again, made by somebody else, or Rockstar missions or whatever it is, just press L1 to bookmark it. And when you go launch your mission, like you're going to launch the creator, it's just bookmark jobs. One of the weird things is when they update it with new cars, it's not selectable when you do your race. You can only race it if you own it. Based on what I was seeing, like there were 41 supercars, and then they added this car, so then there were 42. So under available vehicles, it showed 41 of 42. So if you do create races, it looks like you have to go back and then put a check mark next to the new car. You can't put two checkpoints too close together. So if you've got like a crossover in mind and you got checkpoint 10 and then checkpoint 25, and they can't be right on top of each other or even right next to each other. They've got to be spaced a little bit next to each other. You can see in this video clip here how I had to set one forward. And so just keep that in mind, or look out for that or whatever. That's all. look up my tracks on the Social Club. Alright, so that took forever. Have fun building.